Okay, hello. My name is Dr. James Yoey. This is for Economics 231, and this is a special video on a budget balance amendment, the effects of it under a Keynesian system. A lot of students, there's some written questions sometimes on the quizzes where I ask what are the effects, or how would a balanced budget amendment affect the economy and you know, under the Keynesian system. And most of us intuitively, rightfully so, I think, but intuitively would say, oh, we should balance our budget, just like you should balance your budget at home. Okay, we shouldn't spend more than we make. We should pay all our bills and buy things out of what we earn. Um, that's intuitive, it's logical. You couldn't live your life if you didn't follow this. If you did spend more money than you made for a period of time, you would be accumulating credit. You have to borrow the money, and then eventually someday you have to pay it off. And when you pay it off, you have to reduce your consumption, or your income would have to increase, and you would have to not increase your consumption. Say, okay, I'm going to cut back now, and I'm going to take some of the money, and I'm going to use it to pay off this debt. If you just kept spending more than you earned every year, year after year, eventually you'd reach your credit limit. And someone say, creditors would say, we're not lending you any more money. Okay, we need you to start paying this off because we're afraid that you're not going to be able to. When we look at governments, sometimes people think that there's some sort of a difference, that governments somehow possess some magical powers, and that they can spend more than they take in taxes indefinitely into the future, and no one has to worry about it. The main reason people say, oh, you don't have to worry about that, is because they'll say, oh, well, the domestic debt we just owe to ourselves. So, to some degree, a government bond, at least if it's owned domestically within the country, that's somehow just like having an IOU in your piggy bank when you were a kid. Well, I owe me $50 or 50 cents or whatever, right? And you don't have to pay it off because you owe it to yourself. That, of course, is not true. I don't buy that. I don't know that anybody really does. And then the other argument is we can't balance our budget because when the economy is in a business cycle, if we're having a boom or a bust, we need to run an unbalanced budget. If we're in a recession, which is the main focus here, if the economy is in a recession, that is occurring under Keynesianism because spending is down. Animal spirits are low, and businessmen have cut back on their investment spending, and that's caused the economy to go into a recession because, according to Keynes, prices are inflexible in the downward direction if you go with old school classic Keynes, or prices might adjust, but wages are inflexible, or excuse me, wages are sticky, or prices are sticky if we go with some new or neo-Keynesian type a theory. So to the Keynesians, a balanced budget amendment would be a bad thing in the economy because you would not be able to run a budget deficit, for example. That's where the government spends more than they take in taxes during a recession. That extra spending above taxation, what we take in taxes, would be meant to compensate for the decline in, say, investment spending that occurred to cause the recession, because Keynes thought that investment spending was driven by animal spirits. Now, in the next section of this video, I'm going to use a yellow pad here. I'll show you the yellow pad and a graph, and we're going to explain this using the graph, why, say, a Keynesian would say a balanced budget amendment would be a bad thing. Okay, so I'll be right back, and we'll get done with that. Okay, we're back. Here I have the effects of a balanced budget amendment, and I've got a old school classical Keynesian graph drawn here, or part of it. You see down here at the bottom, on the x-axis, I have output, Output is measured by real GDP in modern macroeconomics. That's gross domestic product, which is the adding of C plus I plus G plus NX, which is all the spending in the economy, divided by a GDP chain price index, which gives us a real value in a current, in the base year's dollars for GDP. So this might be in the base year 2000's dollars. Okay. Then up here we have the price level. Prices go up, the price level increases. Prices go down, the price level decreases. This this vertical section of the aggregate supply curve here. Okay, that corresponds to full employment output. That's the maximum sustainable output. That's where we want the economy to be. Anything less than full employment output, say over here, then that would mean we're in a recession. Okay, because output's lower than where it should be. Okay, this little price level here, where this curve goes horizontal, that's the current price level. We'll call that 100. Okay. So here we take a market basket of goods, calculate how much it's worth, compare it to what it was worth in the base year. If it's the same, then the price level would be 1, and then we multiply that by 100 to make it look pretty. So we have a price level of 100. That basically means that prices are the same this year as they were in whatever base year we chose. Here it's 2000. Okay. Now, here I have an aggregate demand, a supply curve. Well, we need a demand curve, and we have aggregate demand here, AD. Where these two curves meet, aggregate demand and aggregate supply, that determines output and the price level. And that is an equilibrium A. So here, in equilibrium A, the price level is 100, and output is at full employment. Everything's perfect here. No price inflation, no recession. We're all having a wonderful time. Now, aggregate demand is equal to C plus I plus G plus NX. Okay, NX is net exports. That's equal to exports minus imports. So here, when the economy goes into a recession under the old classical Keynesian system, that's caused generally here by a decrease in spending. Keynes himself would probably say that it was due to a decrease in animal spirits, and that would cause a decrease in investment spending. So I here would drop. That would cause aggregate demand to decrease. Okay, we go back up here. This is our aggregate demand curve. This diagonal line here. We're going to decrease that, which means we're going to shift it to the left. So AD shifts from AD to AD prime here, from the black to the red curve, because of a decrease in investment spending caused by a decrease in animal spirits. Okay. Now, our new equilibrium occurs where the red aggregate demand curve crosses the black aggregate supply curve. That's the one that looks like a backward L. We go straight down here, and this economy is in a recession. You can see output has decreased. It's below full employment. The price level hasn't changed, and we're going to call that equilibrium B. So B here, the price level is still 100, but output has decreased, and we're in a recession. Now, according to Keynes, prices would have to drop in order for the economy to compensate for this lack of demand. Okay, but Keynes assumed, and when you assumed, we all know what happens. Keynes assumed that prices that prices were inflexible in the downward direction. They could go up, but they couldn't go down. So because we have a decrease in aggregate demand, to buy all this output, we would need prices to fall so that people with their spending, the reduced amount of spending, could buy all of the goods and services that were produced. If prices were flexible, our aggregate supply curve, if it were real, would just be a vertical line, and a decrease in prices would just cause, demand would just cause prices to fall, and the economy would stay here with full employment. But because they can't go down, we're stuck here at B. And we're not going to get off there until spending is somehow increased. For the Keynesians, one of the easiest ways to increase spending is to increase government spending. We just pass a bill and the government decides that they're going to spend more money, and they're going to spend enough to make up for what these businessmen stopped spending. So here, we're going to increase government spending. And if we increase it by the right amount, this government spending with a multiplier, so we're not going to say it has to correspond dollar to dollar, but this increase in government spending will offset the effects of this investment spending on the economy, and that will return aggregate demand back to its normal level. So we'll shift aggregate demand back here. Now, in order to do this, if we increase government spending, I didn't say anything about taxes, did I? Okay, so here, government spending is equal to taxes plus borrowing plus seigniorage. We'll assume seigniorage is 0 just for the sake of argument here. So in order for the government to increase their spending when we have a balanced budget without raising taxes, something on the right-hand side here has to go up to match this increase in spending, and here we would have to borrow money, and the government would have to issue bonds. So here, government spending is greater than taxes. That's a budget deficit. So to get out of a recession, the Keynesians would argue we need the government to operate at a budget deficit. That's where the government spends more than they take in taxes. We're spending more than we take in taxes. We have to borrow the difference, and that will cause aggregate demand to increase back from AD prime back to AD, get the economy back to point A here, where the economy is at full employment and unemployment is at its natural rate, and everybody's back to work and happy, and the economy is producing at its potential real GDP. We're happy. Okay, thank you for listening. Goodbye.